The West Coast League is what it says on the tin. It's a league made up of teams from the west coast of the US and Canada. Here are the West Coast League ballparks. Vince Jenner Stadium, Bend, Elks. Now you have to be careful when you bend elks, you might break them and they are quite dear. This venue has hosted a ton of different minor league teams over the years, but the Elks have been here the longest. They started out in 2000. It's a modest ballpark, as are many in the league, but that does have its benefits. You might even see some elk sitting up there in the trees. Goss Stadium at Coleman Field, Corvallis Knights. This old ballpark has been home to the Oregon State Beavers since it opened way back in 1907, making it one of the oldest continuously used ballparks in the world. The Knights didn't move in until 100 years later, so they are very much playing second fiddle. It's a quirky venue, not so much the dimensions, more so the seating layout. I rather like it. Also like the brick exterior, which reflects its age somewhat. David Story Field, Cowlitz Black Bears. Although there are very few seats in the house, they do actually have an interesting story to them. They were brought over from the long since demolished Sick Stadium, the brief home of the Seattle Pilots. They don't make seats like they used to. They are actually much better now. Another old school element that I'm a fan of is the wooden railing here. A simple yet impactful element that highlights the... I don't know what I'm saying. Charles B. Walker Stadium at Lents Park, Portland Pickles. You've gotta love baseball team names. This is another old venue, but it was renovated prior to the Pickles' arrival in 2016. The best aspect of the venue though predates the renovation, and that is this row of trees beyond the outfield. They not only look good, but separate this field from the one next door, minimizing instances of home run to the back of head syndrome. You might even see some pickles sitting up in those trees. Ridgefield Outdoor Recreation Complex, Ridgefield Raptors. As part of a newly built sports complex, this field obviously doesn't have the charm or the character of some of the other venues we've seen. It also doesn't have the natural grass. One thing it does have over the others is that you can be absolutely certain that there's no asbestos in the house. They don't insulate buildings like they used to. Oh, and I do like that colour scheme. Hamlin Sports Complex, Springfield Drifters. This is another field that is part of a sports complex, obviously. It actually doesn't look like this anymore, as it was rebuilt prior to the relaunch of Bushnell University's baseball program and the establishment of the Springfield Drifters. It's quite similar to the last one. It too has artificial turf and a fairly modern aesthetic overall. Not too shabby. Burlesque Stadium, Walla Walla Sweets. There's a Walla Walla in Australia as well. Interestingly, this Walla Walla means running waters. The one in Australia means place of many rocks. Combine the two and you've got yourself a nice cascade. You could even combine the two names as well and call it Walla Walla. The stadium is a little unusual in that it is transformed into a football ground during the football season. But other than that, it is pretty straightforward. Oh, and for those with a sweet tooth, don't get too excited when you see that there's a sweet shop here. It's just Walla Walla Sweets merch, not a Twizzler in sight. Yakima County Stadium, Yakima Valley Pippins. A pippin is an apple apparently. I guess that makes sense, apples have a pip in them. And I'm liking the team's green apple colour scheme. It would have been nice if the seating reflected that. However, the team has been here for under a decade, and it would be a bit wasteful and costly to replace the seats. The mascot that you see there is cleverly called Scott T. Pippen, because of the basketball. Yeah, he looks pretty pleased with himself.
Don't be fooled. Behind this smile is nothing but sadness. My head is an apple. My head is an apple.
Joe Martin Stadium, Bellingham Bells. I don't think there has ever been a more obvious nickname for a team. Maybe the Louisville Bats. This has one of the smaller capacities in the league, but most of the seats are under the cover of this unique roof, held up by wooden beams, which looks kinda cool. The press boxes are almost part of the roof. The seating in the stand is also quite steep, which makes for a better view. R.E. Max Field, Edmonton Riverhawks. We have arrived at our first Canadian stadium, and it's also the largest venue in the league. It's not quite as simple as it looks from the air. Firstly, we've got the classic baseball exterior made of red bricks and hits of green. We haven't actually seen that much of that in this video. The stand is technically double tiered, but most of the seating is in the upper deck, giving spectators a nice elevated view. There's also a section of bench seating further along the foul line, so it's got a bit of everything. Norbrook Stadium, Kamloops Northstars. Well, firstly, I'm not happy with the name Northstars. It's the 21st century. We don't discriminate against south-handed people anymore. Anyway, this might have a tiny capacity by comparison, but it could be even more interesting than the last one. The unique seating situation in particular. It's segmented but connected, kinda. All of the seating is elevated significantly above the field, and unlike the last one, there are no ground level seats. Elks Stadium, Kelowna Falcons. The team from Bend must feel quite welcome when they visit this stadium. Well, there is a Canadian flag painted behind home plate. That'd remind them that they are indeed on enemy soil. On top of that, you have this behemoth of a stand behind home plate full of dozens of mild-mannered fans that will loudly clap for the home team, but not so much for you. Yeah, this place has got to be as intimidating as it gets. Sir Roman Stadium, Nanaimo Night Owls. This is a seemingly quite simple ballpark, and it is, but there is one aspect that sets it apart. I feel like every baseball league in North America has to have a ballpark with a green monster of some sort. This is that very one. The big green wall in right field used to be made from wood, but was recently replaced because the old one was deemed a safety hazard. As the old saying goes, a big green wooden splinter to the face hurts. There is now plenty of padding. Civic Field, Port Angeles Lefties. For whatever reason, they really hate this team in rural Mississippi. Maybe they're just not a fan of a baseball stadium where the largest and most impressive section of seating is along the right foul line. Just like in Walla Walla, it's also used for football. Or soccer, as you may have already figured out. Other than that, there's not much else to say. Paul Thomas Field, Wenatchee Apple Sox. Unlike the mountains that surround the town of Wenatchee, this ballpark is quite diminutive in stature. There are barely 1,000 seats in the house, but those seats do have an interesting story to them. Similar to David Story Field, they came from a much larger stadium. Well, some of the seats anyway. They came from the Kingdome, the former home of football and baseball in Seattle. Royal Athletic Park, Victoria Harbour Cats. Like two that we saw earlier, this is clearly designed to accommodate various forms of football as well as baseball. In fact, in the early days of the stadium, which were the early 1900s, it was the sport of lacrosse that dominated the schedule at this ground. For a long time it was Canada's official national sport. The layout here, however, is even more unusual than the others, as the seating extends well beyond the bounds of the baseball field. I like it. So there you have it, time to pick a favourite. I'm gonna go with Goss Stadium. Nice brick exterior, interesting layout, orange seats, enough said. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing, and as always, thanks for watching, have a good one.